The Lord be with you. A proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Once when Jesus was praying in solitude and the disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist. Others, Elijah. Still others, one of the ancient prophets has arisen." Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said in reply, "The Christ of God." He rebuked them and directed them not to tell this to anyone. He said, "The Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." Then he said to all, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus was praying about when he was praying alone? It's an important truth of our faith that Jesus truly was praying, not just play acting or talking to himself. The Son can truly pray to the Father because while both are fully God, our God is one in three persons. The spirit of petition that the prophet Zechariah promised would be poured out on all people truly dwelled with Jesus and flowed from him to us, enlivening us to pray just as he prayed. But what was he praying? I'd always kind of written off my curiosity about these moments as something to get past, maybe as a prompt for me to pray for greater humility, because not everything is ours to be known. But praying with and studying this passage from Luke's Gospel over this past week, it occurred to me that while the text doesn't quite come out and tell us, it lets us make more than a guess as to at least part of what Jesus might have been praying about. Jesus prayed that Peter might know who he is. Let me back up. Firstly, Peter, like the other disciples, has given absolutely no indication up to this point in the gospel that he understands who Jesus is. All that we've heard from the disciples and Peter, their spokesman, over the last two chapters of the gospel is them not getting it. They are brave enough to at least admit their perplexity after Jesus stilled the storm, not knowing who this is who can do such a thing. Peter has no idea that Jesus is someone whose body can heal when it is touched in a crowd, when the woman with the flow of blood reaches out and is healed. And together with the other disciples, Peter was sure that there was no way Jesus could feed a multitude with so few loaves and fishes. But now Jesus asks who they think he is, and Peter suddenly gets it. This is the Messiah, the long-awaited Christ. What's changed? Peter's confession flows from Jesus' prayer. Jesus prays that Peter might know him, might know who he is, and Jesus' prayer is effective. Peter knows. Now, when I teach, I always pray for my students. And while I try and make my prayers for them more holistic than just this, I'll admit that before a test, I do pray that they'd remember at least some of what I tried to teach them. But Jesus is doing far more than that. Jesus is not praying that Peter would remember some fascinating intellectual tidbit. He's praying that Peter would not just know something about him, but know him, and know him so well he can name that knowing, put into words the insight that this is the Messiah, the one on whom God's anointing rests, the one from whom that precious oil flows out to us. This is the one who will lead us to true freedom, freedom from sin and death, from all that keeps us from living as lovingly, as holily, with each other, with creation, and with God as he does. He prays that Peter will know that, because knowing Jesus that well, that intimately, is to love him and to be emboldened by that love. Knowing him that well, that intimately, is to be excited to holiness by him, to get a sense of the grandeur of God's dream for all humanity can be, and to be so ardently enamored by the dream and the one in whom it takes flesh that we follow him, that we follow in his love, that we let ourselves be made able to live in holy integrity with love for each other, for creation, and for God, forever. For that's what heaven is. Jesus prayed that for Peter, and Jesus prays that for us. Jesus sits at the right hand of his Father and prays that we might know him. Not so that we might gain points on some accuracy test, but that we might know him well enough, intimately enough, that we might be able to name that knowing and love and follow. For that's what comes next for Jesus, what has to. Peter has given the right answer, an amazing right answer, but an answer that's insufficient in itself, and so can't be shared on its own. Jesus' radical commitment to love us will lead him into collision with Roman imperial power. He knows that. The kind of topsy-turvy, messy, salvific grace that Mary sang of in the Magnificat turns the world upside down. And worlds don't like being turned upside down, or at least the powerful that think they rule them don't like it. So Jesus knows he'll come face to face, hand to nail, with all the force they can wield to stop him. But love is more powerful than death, so not even death at our hands, can keep Jesus from being with us. He must rise on the third day. And he bids us follow him, because that's the way to be with him. That's the way to come to know him. We learn by doing. That's the way to love like him, which in the end is all there is. And if we follow him, if we love like him, there is no way to avoid that cross, not in this world. Whoever loves consents to someday know grief, even if we manage to avoid every other cross. But those who weep are blessed, Jesus assures us, are happy, because those tears can only have come from love, at least in nascent form. Hung around the neck of Holy Cross Religious we wear the cross and anchors. It is etched in the floor of this basilica in front of the altar. An anchor gives stability to a boat, not by evading stormy waters, but by piercing through them and finding solid rock on the other side. So on his cross, did Christ refuse to evade the suffering of humanity, but pierce through it, leave it forever pierced, forever open to the glory that lies beyond. And so we take up our crosses, not because we delight in misery, but because we know they are anchors. We know where they lead. We know they are our only hope.